What would you do if you found out that you had a debilitating disease like ALS? Well, our next guest discovered just that and decided to become an advocate for people who are suffering with the disease. We have Mindy Uhrlaub, who's sharing her new book, and it's titled Last Nerve, a Memoir of Illness and the Endurance of Family. Mindy, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming and sharing your story. So tell us about how this came about and some of your story.
Well, in 2018, when my mother was battling ALS, which is a fatal neurodegenerative disease, my husband was going through stage 4 lymphoma. He was going through chemotherapy, and I had a child who was really suffering, and I had a second child who was only 12 years old, and things were very overwhelming for me. I started keeping this journal and talking about how hard it was. And all of a sudden, I made this decision to take the genetic test to find out if I carried the gene for ALS because I knew that my mother's father had passed away from it, and I knew it must be genetic. And so I did the test. I found out that I carried the gene C9 or F72, that my two kids were at genetic risk for developing ALS, that I was at risk. And so, uh, one thing led to another. I joined a bunch of longitudinal research studies and kept journaling about it. And then I was like, wait, I think there's a book in here. And realized, that my struggle wasn't just mine alone, that there are thousands of people carrying genes for fatal neurodegenerative diseases.
Walk us through your book. Someone that may have never heard of your book before, what are in those pages? What's inside?
Well, I mean, basically, it's kind of a sandwich generation memoir. It's really about, um, when you're in your midlife and you're taking care of children who might be struggling, and you might be taking care of parents who may be dying or sick, and then you realize, oh, my body is not uh, infallible. We all have things that can hurt us, and so when things get sort of overwhelming, this is that kind of book. And how does one survive this and actually thrive?
I want to ask you this because we've all seen the ALS challenges that have gone on, where people are on social media doing, being hosed down. That came back. People have experienced the ice bucket challenge. That came back around. Very trendy things that people are doing, maybe not really understanding what ALS is all about, but in some cases still raising money for the cause. What has been your particular mission of letting people know about ALS?
Well, I mean, first of all, anytime anyone asks me to appear, like on a news show or on a committee, I say yes. So I say yes a lot. Being part of longitudinal research means me flying all over the country and giving parts of my body. And so you get to know researchers pretty well when you do that. And, I sat on a committee that wrote a report, Living with ALS, that was from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And, I testified before the FDA. And I think this is the idea, is that, the more you talk about it, the more it's demystified for people. And most people don't understand that, there are thousands of people living with ALS, but of those thousands, 15% of us carry genes that cause ALS and other things like frontotemporal degeneration. So, I think that just being as loud as I can, it helps. And it also helps to go and talk to politicians about, funding research for medicine.
Yeah, we read earlier that you've been part of some of those research studies for the search for a cure for ALS. Do you see any new breakthroughs or innovations in the horizon?
Absolutely. Recently within the last 2 years, a drug came out called Qalsody, and it targets one of the other genes, SOD1, and they've seen improvements in people with SOD1 ALS. And, for me, that just is going to crack things open. And, I'm hearing from researchers who I'm friends with that there are things regarding CRISPR that are potentially on the way, and that's very exciting. Um, they're also finding that certain genes are not as penetrant, meaning that sometimes sometimes you don't develop ALS even though you might have a gene for it.
Let me ask you this. You said that you've been participating in these studies, giving parts of your body. What, someone may be out there right now, maybe they are a carrier and they just haven't gone as deep as you have and tried to help find this cure. Walk me through what participating in some of these studies actually looks like.
Well, like the easiest parts are things like speech studies, where you just talk to a computer and it follows your progression of your speech over time. Um, there are other things like giving blood, which is slightly more invasive. And then there are the sort of like really heavy hitting things like giving, like skin samples so that they can develop ALS and, give cells ALS and then try to cure it. The sort of gnarliest thing is doing lumbar punctures, spinal taps, and not a lot of people like to sign up for those things, but I do it because I have two kids that could develop these diseases, and not only that, but I don't really necessarily want ALS. So yeah, I mean, this is why I do it.
Yeah, it must be some hard conversations having, your kids also be a part of this. Do they see you doing these research studies and say maybe one day that they'd like to do that, or are they kind of just watching and admiring you from afar?
One of my kids has chosen, to not think about it, which is probably a great thing. He's 21, he's got other stuff to do. My younger son has already started participating in research. He doesn't know his genetic status, but, that's good. I want him to live his life. And, my kids knew that I was an activist already. I have written other activism books, and this just happens to be more personal. I'm excited because I have one of my kids is coming with me actually to Chicago next week. I'm going to be presenting a book talk at the Secret World Bookshop in Highland Park on Saturday the 9th. And so the fact that he kind of flies across the country with me to support me, it just means so much to me. And, he's kind of a humanitarian himself, which is great.
Someone that has now heard your story that may want to come to that event in Highland Park, what exactly will they see? And will your book be for sale there as well?
Yes, my book will be for sale there. There'll be a Q&A. I will do a little, reading from the prologue, and anybody who has questions about ALS or FTD or C9 ORF72, which is the gene that I carry, should come out and see it. And we're going to do a little after party at a Kurt's Cafe in Highland Park. So it's actually going to be a really fun event, and I'll be there signing copies and saying hello to everybody. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Mindy, I love everything that you had to say. Thank you so much for sharing part of your journey with us today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, it was a
Yes,
pleasure.
thank you, Mindy.
Yeah, very insightful there.
Story.
Yeah, very inspiring story and very personal. So it was very nice of her to come on and share that with us.